Hello, my friends. Good evening and welcome once again to Kardec Radio. You are with us here, Spiritism, a closer look. I'm Luiz Lima. I'm going to be your host tonight, and we have an interesting topic tonight. Tonight's closer look will be at hope, and we will call this the joy of hope. Yeah, there's a lot of joy and hope. When there is no joy, there is no hope. Basically, they kind of one brings the other. They kind of go together. So we will be discussing, bring some ideas here for our reflection, myself included, of course. And just be with us here for comments and questions. Just put your comments and questions. We will get to them. We will address them. I want to start by reading something that is here in this book. Allan Kardec's Heaven and Hell. Heaven and Hell is one of the five books on the basic books of Spiritism codification. Spiritism, the first publication is 1857. This book was published in 1865. So we are about 8 years after the beginning of Spiritism. By this time, though, Allan Kardec had a lot more experience in dealing with the situation because it was fairly new. Nobody knew anything about it in the late 1850s. So he was much more acquainted. He was much more into it and had a broader understanding as compared to the first days. So it's a very rich book, and it's about heaven. He talks about heaven, hell, divine justice, uh, and there's a lot in the underlines about suffering, punishment. All of those things are addressed beautifully, beautifully, beautifully in this book. I want to read to you quickly so we can start our discussion here. The very first paragraph. Very first. When you open the book, that's the very first thing you are going to find. So here we go. We live, we think, we act. That is certain. And we die. That is no less certain. So far so good, right? We live, we think, we act, we die, and those are just facts. These are not perceptions because perception is a different thing. Different people can have different perceptions upon the same fact. These are just facts. Nobody's uh, analyzing any of these things as of yet. He's just mentioning that we live, we think, we act, and we die. So here goes, continues. But where do we go when we leave this earth behind? What will it be like for us after death? Will we be better off or worse? Will we even exist or not? Being or non-being, such is the alternative. Forever or nevermore. All or nothing. See, those are all dualities. Will we live forever or will everything end once and for all? Is it even worthwhile to think about all this? You see, all of these things are what we call the perennial questions, the questions that, they've been around for centuries and such a long, long, long time. And of course, there are different answers depending on who you ask for these questions. But so there are different perceptions. And he continues to, so we can close the reading here. All human beings sense the need to stay alive, to enjoy life, to love, and to be happy. I'm going to say that again. All human beings sense the need to stay alive, to enjoy life, to love, and to be happy. If dying persons are told that they will live a little longer, that their time has been delayed, or especially that they will be happier than they have ever been, if all of this happens, then their hearts rejoice. That's how the book starts. That's the opening phrase, the opening paragraph. So there's a lot for us to extract from here. It is basically, essentially, a message about hope, right? We live and so and so and so, but we need more. There's more to it, and that's in all of us. It's almost like we could say that hope is a built-in tool for humans, or that humans have, because we all have it in one degree or another, more or less, more intense, less intense, but we all have it. Now, hope to be something that we can use in our favor, not against us, has to be something active, not passive. Active meaning, uh, I hope that this thing happens. I hope that I will get this. I hope that this will happen. But we have to move. We have to do things that will lead us towards that goal. Hope is a goal. I hope that this thing is going to happen. So the goal is this thing is going to happen. So I have to move towards that. So hope calls for movement. It's not something passive or negative that carries this degree of, with some, this energy with some degree of suffering or revolt. No, that's the passive negative hope that doesn't take us anywhere. Hope is active. Hope works because there is a goal. It could be a very simple thing. In 1 hour, I want to do this thing, and I hope I can do this thing. So hope calls for action. It is something that we need to act upon. It depends on us. It is passive hope, as I mentioned. It's something that we just have a thought about. I wish this thing would happen. I hope this thing happens. So we sit down, we tie our hands, and just wait for that to happen. And not necessarily it's going to happen. So it's like if we were waiting for a divine decree coming down from heavens, right, showing up in our mailbox and saying, "What you were waiting for is here." It's not that. Hope is a lot more. Hope requires movement, requires action. One interesting phrase that I've always come across when I'm reading different things is from English historian Thomas Fuller, and he would say, "If it were not for hope, the heart would break." That's very interesting, very deep. If it were not for hope, the heart would break. Right? So our emotions, in a way or another, depend on hope, depending on thinking about goals and doing something to meet that goal, walking towards it, or making something that's going to put us in that direction. That is hope. One interesting story that comes to mind right now, just came to mind, is Viktor Frankl, very known man. He was a survivor of the Holocaust. He saw his entire family being murdered, assassinated in the concentration camps, and they didn't kill him, of course. And so he was in this situation, and he tells us that's awful, but that's reality, unfortunately. He tells us that the thing about the German soldiers and the Nazi was not necessarily imprison the Jews. It was a little more than that. It was to humiliate. That is the right word according to him, and he was there. So he felt it, he lived through it. So the goal was to humiliate all the Jews. And one of the techniques that they used was they wouldn't give them food for a day, just one meal. And that meal would be water with sand from the floor and the head of a fish, just the head with the bones, meaning no meat whatsoever. And they had this for in the situation, the place that he was, in the concentration camp he was. And he would say, we got the same thing every day, and that was it. That was the meal for the day. And of course, a lot of people, rebelled. There was a lot of revolt, a lot of you can imagine, right? Negative thoughts and the worst kind of energy possible. And after a few days, he said to himself, just like my friends here, my colleagues, my peoples, I don't like this. Of course, nobody likes that. But if I keep having this, if I die, quotes, right? If I die every time they bring this meal, I'm never gonna live here. I'm leave here. I'm not gonna leave here. I'm not gonna be able to live. I need to do something, some sort of movement, some sort of action that takes me out of this place. And he said it cannot be something physical, meaning running from the concentration camp trying to escape, or slapping the German soldiers in the face. It couldn't be anything physical because they had no they just couldn't do it. They were under heavy control. Right? Everybody, all the soldiers were in there. They were all armed and everything. So he said, it's got to be something at the emotional level. I need to rise up and think of something else. So when the meal came next day, and that was the fish head with the bones and everything. So instead of just revolting and throwing it all out, he takes the head, the fish head, starts looking at it and starts analyzing the beauty. Look at this, the beauty of the bones in the fish head, how all the little bones connected, how the eyes and everything, how everything was connected inside the fish head. And and every day was different. They had different fish heads from different fish species every day. So he started paying attention to this thing and saying, wow, nature is absolutely beautiful, because the fish head from yesterday had this and this and this, and the bones were like this. Today is completely different. It's still fish head and there are still bones, but it's arranged in a different way, in a different format. It is simply different than yesterday. And the next day was a different fish, and so and so. So he said, well, in the middle of all this mess here that I am, all right, there's beauty here. And beauty is what I'm going to use to lift myself up, pick myself up from the floor. And I hope that by living this way, I will be out of here one day. And oh boy, wasn't he right? Wasn't he right? Certainly, the war was over. He was in the middle of all those Jews that got, finally, they were freed up, and they went, to a brand new, they met a brand new life, all of them. So that's Viktor Frankl. He left the concentration camps as a free man. He starts studying psychology. He was a psychologist before. So he, starts looking for the meaning of life. And he creates an entire science called logotherapy, which seeks for the meaning of life. And the reason why he took this route about the meaning of life is because of his experience in there. He would say, some of us being the Jews in the concentration camp, some of us didn't die. We committed suicide, but not physical, just by not having hope. The next day, they were worse than the day before. and the next day worse than the one. And so they were getting worse emotionally, psychologically, to the point that they couldn't take it anymore. They died. And this is a very interesting point in our conversation here. That is, probably, at least in the recent history, probably the best example of hope that we can have. And, it's not too long ago. The war, it wasn't ended in 1945. So it's not too long ago. And it was just beautiful. So when we look at us, Spiritists, studying the message of Jesus, that's the message he brought to us. He brought a message of hope and much more, of course, love, charity, justice, charity being, the on top of everything. So the way that Jesus brought the, the take that he showed us, the angle that he showed us about hope, was so intense and so interesting that it changed the world. So the world has now a before and after. Before him, after him. Our calendar is based on him. So he was this incarnated spirit, very highly evolved spirit, perfect spirit, that changed our perspective on things. You see, changing our perspective of things doesn't mean that next day we are doing as we understood, because this we need time for this transformation. And time, how do we buy time? By having several different lifetimes, reincarnations. So one after the other, we keep looking from a different perspective on things, until that there's a point that we completely forget the original way of seeing things. And that's when we are going to be able to transform ourselves. And then we're going to see things differently. That's when we are going to be in conformity with the laws of God. So far, most of us are not. We have a hard time with in relationships, dealing with people, dealing with situations. Some of the things are easier for some people, more difficult for others. And that's what we were saying in the beginning. For the same fact, we can have several different perceptions, because different people have different perceptions. So all of these things that Jesus came to show us physically, walking down the streets of Jerusalem and Capernaum, and showing us how to do things, they are bringing a message of hope. Yes, there is hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Einstein, one of the greatest scientists of all times, he had an interesting view on things. He would say that every time you have a problem, and of course the problem has to be fixed, but the solution cannot be brought in at the same level that the problem was created. The solution has to come from at least one level higher than the problem. If you try to bring a solution from the same level, you're going to create another problem. So the solution comes from one level above it. And at least personally myself, that's how I see Spiritism. Jesus came and taught us all these things, and he was this great counselor. He came as a counselor. He didn't impose anything on anyone. He didn't, condemn anyone. He simply brought something for us to experience. Spiritism is going to take all of that and explain why I should do it. See, Jesus will say to the adulterous woman, for example, if I were you, I wouldn't do this again. But the question at the time was, why? Why should not I kill anyone? Don't kill is in the law, but why exactly is that in the law? That explanation does not come in details until Spiritism comes alive in 1857. And it's all in there. It brings us clarification, explanation, details, and examples and messages from those who are one level above the incarnated ones, the highly evolved spirits. They are one level above, at least one level above us. So their take on things, their perspective on things is not the same as ours. It's different. They have parameters and they see variables that we don't. So their analysis will never be the same as ours. And that, I think, is where we need to connect ourselves to a higher level. So we still have the problems. But if I look at the problem for 5 minutes, let's say, for next 5 minutes, I look at the problem from one level above, I see it differently. And I see what I should be doing instead. Because that's how Spiritism teaches us to think and to reflect and to act upon. So the message, the details that Spiritism brings will give us that, will empower us to do this. A lot of times we do not understand things. We just, revolt and rebel, and we call up on God and say, what's happening to you? Why are you doing this to me? It happens to all of us. And why is that? Because we are not understanding things properly. Spiritism comes to clarify. It's an eye-opening tool. Here's an analogy, very simple, by the way. If you buy a fridge, and what's the purpose of buying a fridge? You want to cool things down, right? You want your food, your milk, whatever it is, it needs to be cooled. Otherwise, it's going to spoil. So instead of being at room temperature, let's just say 75 degrees, well, let's make 85 because I'm in Florida. Okay, so instead of being 85 degrees, it needs to be 35, 40, 45 maybe. And that's why you go to a store and you buy a fridge. So the purpose of buying the fridge clearly is to cool things down, to cool food, whatever. Now, if we do not understand how the fridge works, if you go to the back of the fridge, right, on the front you have the doors that you open and your food is there. If you go to the back of the fridge, it is warm. It is warmer than room temperature. So somebody that does not understand how the fridge works, they will go to the back of the fridge and say, this thing is broken. This thing doesn't do what it's supposed to. It's warming up instead of cooling my food. And though this is exactly why it cools the food, the warmth in the back of the fridge is just a byproduct of what makes it work. You see, we cannot concentrate on the byproduct because we might have a distorted idea of things. We're going to look at the back of the fridge and say, throw it out because it doesn't cool anything. It just warms up. No, that is the byproduct. So when we look at war, and especially now we're all seeing all those horrific scenes on TV, it's just some of them are really tough and difficult to watch, but those are facts. Those are facts. It is happening. And that is the back of the fridge. There is something in the works we might not see as of yet, but there is something in the works that needs that to happen. That is the warmth in the back of the freezer. Something much better than this is coming. So we should not, I'm not saying we cannot, but we should not just flatly revolt and call names and question God's existence and Jesus' existence. That is exactly what Spiritism explains to us, which gives us hope. And hope is what we're here to discuss today. Hope, we could say, it's a primitive form of faith, maybe. We could, go along those lines. Faith would be at a much higher level or a much higher layer than hope. But hope is a beginning. Is it easy to have hope in the modern times? No, it's not. Is it possible? Completely. So now we go into two things. Is it possible? Yes or no? If it's possible, is it probable? Probability, yes or no? And then it depends on each one of us. We make that probability be 100%, 0%, and anything in between. It's called free will. Like I said in the beginning, there will be no divine decree in our mailbox tomorrow morning telling us this is how it is for you today. We have to hope for, we have to set goals and just make it happen. Hope requires us to be active. Passiveness is not going to take us anywhere. So that was a message I want to bring to you today for reflection, myself included, because we gather all these things and pieces of information, and it makes us think. It makes us to go, sleep our heads at night on the pillow, and just, oh my God, what is my hope for tomorrow? Is there hope? Always. So let it be good hope, active hope. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week, and be well.